Well, welcome. It's great to be able to just visit with you wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this or seeing this. We are presently just a couple weeks away from Holy Week and the most important time of our liturgical life and our life, which is the redemptive work of Jesus Christ to be able to connect us to the redemptive love of His in the Father. And so it's so beautiful to just be able to be here today with you all as we work through about a little bit more than halfway through Lent. And at least something that's been on my heart lately is just being able to reconnect with different aspects of church life. Just a couple days ago, I got to be in the Prairie in Lawrenceville, which is just outside of Pittsburgh. It's right near the city of Pittsburgh. And there are roughly 40 or so Capuchins. And you walk into their big conference room there, and they call it Capuchin Cafe. And it just dawned on me that if you ever drank a cappuccino, it's because of the Capuchins. They invented cappuccino. And the problem is they didn't monetize it. So I was like challenging them. Like, could you imagine if a quarter of a penny for every cappuccino that was ever drank, that they would get that? You imagine all the good they could be doing with that money. But anyway, obviously St. Francis and the Capuchins don't think like I do, and praise God, because they're saints and I have a long way to go.
An office, and I can take that idea.
And so, yes, they do have a development office, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, and maybe that's why I mentioned that, because that is a great venue for development. They should sue everybody who gets a cappuccino without getting Capuchin approval for it. But my point is this, is that many times when we encounter a priest, we think the priest is a diocesan priest, somebody who works in a parish. But obviously, in our grouping, we've been blessed in Our Lady of Peace in Conway, which is where I live presently, by a community of Franciscans called Capuchins. And, you know, Padre Pio, St. Leopold Mandic, these are some of the great Capuchins of all time. And then there's others, obviously. But they used to run Our Lady of Peace. And so the Capuchin influence into Our Lady of Peace in Conway and our church is so beautifully seen there. So much so that on St. Patrick's Day, I have a confession to make. It snowed. We got like 6 inches of snow, like right near that time. And I went and did a snow angel in front of St. Francis. Okay. But I was wearing my Crosby St. Patrick jersey and told St. Francis that today we got to celebrate an Irish saint. And he was kind of happy with that, but I don't think but anyway, the point is that like St. Francis is not Italian. You know, I hate to break it to you, but St. Francis did definitely influence our church in such incredible ways by, bringing the gift of the simplicity of poverty and the love for Jesus, especially the love for Jesus and the nativity set. The church then has all these different ways in which people can flourish. And it's some sense like a garden where some are daisies, some are daffodils, some are roses. I'm probably a weed, but they're just different types, right? And so the religious communities like the Capuchins have a way of serving the church through their charism, through the way in which the Holy Spirit has them blossom. And the Jesuits do the same, the Dominicans, and then there's the diocesan priests, which have a specific mission of obviously bringing families of people together in communities to bring them closer to Jesus, to open up doors for Jesus. That's why I'm called a father. So within the beautiful array of way in which the Holy Spirit has inspired people to give their lives to Christ, the first and the primordial way in which we've seen people following Jesus through this type of lifestyle is a great example of somebody sitting next to me, which is the Consecrated Virgins. It's one of the first organized ways or ways in which people were able to follow Jesus. And obviously, when you think of like, who was the first that we know biblically to receive the message of Jesus Christ's resurrection? It was Mary Magdalene. And you can already see in Mary Magdalene this image of a woman who basically set aside everything that she was, including her body and including everything that she had, to be able to just be at the service and be with Jesus Christ. And so you can see already the seeds of this beautiful gift of virginity and the donation of their life, consecrating their whole self to Jesus for the fruitfulness of being able to glorify God through their lives as at the service of Jesus and his church. And so consecrated virgins and consecrated life doesn't get a lot of publicity today. You won't see a lot of statistics about them. They're not going to show up on the sports page every day. So if you read the sports page, you're not going to hear a lot about them. Although you will hear about Hail Marys being thrown, because really, when we're desperate, we go to Mary, and she probably could be considered the mother of all consecrated, which I imagine she is. And so there is that there. But my point in all of this is sometimes in our church, because of the routines that we get into, we can only see a certain facet of Catholic life and not see all the diversity that's there. And one of those diverse ways of living, or just a very beautiful way of living, is through their consecration. And so that's why I'm so happy to be able to introduce our guest here, because she is a consecrated virgin. She's dedicated her whole entire life to Jesus Christ in this incredible spousal-like spiritual and in great unity with Jesus Christ. And so, Lauren, welcome to the program. I am really honored that you would be here today. Yeah. Would you just introduce yourself a little bit? Like, what's your full name? Where are you from?
So my name is Lauren Gault, and I grew up in Morningside, went to school, made all my sacraments at St. Raphael's, now St. Jude Parish. And now I live in Bellevue. I belong to Our Lady of the Angels in Lawrenceville. And I also go to Assumption here and there. So I'm just, the whole diocese. I mean, it's my territory. It's my passion and my prayer life. But, I'm inserted in the diocese to support the diocese. So I'm all over.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I love about Morningside is my grandfather. He went to school at St. Raphael's. And so I always feel great kind of connection with Morningside. Talk about Morningside as a really unique neighborhood. If you never knew what Morningside was, or you're watching us from outside of Pittsburgh, how would you describe Morningside?
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful little community. I mean, growing up there, there's just a few little streets that go back and forth, but everybody, is a neighbor to everybody else there. And there's just a lot of like celebration and beauty in it, because St. Raphael's was kind of the heart of it in a lot of ways. We had like the St. Rocco Festival, the bazaar. So the neighborhood came alive with the church, and everybody, you'd see everyone walking to school and walking their dogs. So yeah, it was a great place to grow up.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like the old school neighborhood, where if you needed some milk, you go over to your neighbors, or if you're running out of eggs, you go over there, or if somebody died, you would have a neighbor there to help you and be able to like make food for you, or just to be close to. Or if your parents had to go out for a little bit, you could go over to your neighbors and just hang out.
Oh yeah, we did that a lot.
Did you do that a lot? Talk about your family, your parents a little bit. Were they what religious were they both Catholic? What was your mom and dad like?
Yeah, so growing up, we grew up Catholic. I have two brothers, an older and a younger, so I'm the middle child and have no middle child syndrome or anything like that. Perfect.
Sure. I'm a middle child. I have middle child syndrome. I'm glad you got away with that. What's the age difference between your brothers?
We're each, I think it's a year and a half apart, so we're all pretty close. They're, yeah. I guess if I'm 31, about 29 and 33, I think.
So what does it mean to be a middle child to you?
Yeah.
Especially with two brothers sandwiching you.
Right. Well, it was an interesting dynamic, I guess, growing up. I think in a way I had some freedom, because I was able to I play with them, but sometimes I played a part. And so I did my own little, imaginary things and had my own, time. I also liked, my mom and I would take walks when I was little together. So there was a lot of that, I could kind of get in and out,
Did you feel like your brothers forced you to play stuff that you didn't like to play? Like football or like baseball and stuff?
I wanted to play.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It was just sometimes it could get a little rough, but yeah, you got to make your way in there.
Did you have favorite things that you liked to do when you were a little girl?
I like to write and I like to read a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then baking with my mom. I love baking.
What were some of the books that you liked?
Oh, I would, especially if it was like collections, like Nancy Drew, um, chapter book series, Little House on the Prairie. I got into a lot of those.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What is it about Little House on the Prairie that seems to be so perennial? When I was a boy, we used to watch
Yeah.
Little House on the Prairie as well. And is it Michael Landon? He was kind of
Yeah.
one of the lead characters, and
Yeah.
Mary and Laura's obviously Laura and all those different characters. What do you recall about that? Why did you like that, do you think? Or why do you think that's such a valuable thing?
I mean, I think it just had such an innocence and but at the same time, you watch these characters mature um, with their families and in their towns, and so you really got a dynamic of a lot of different characters. And
Mm.
I think it was easy too to like see like I could fit in with this person or that person because they had a variety.
Was there a character that you related most to, like that you admired?
Well, maybe probably Laura, but maybe Carrie too on occasion. She's just tumbling down the hill and just kind of doing her thing, and sometimes
There was an independence in Carrie, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Like you like the tumbling and just being
yeah,
a little different than everybody else, right?
yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, and they were pioneers, so they had to
right.
have that independence and that type of like. When did you start to notice that you like to write?
I mean, I think all as I was growing up as a child, I remember asking my mom for like a diary or journal, and I remember looking back as I grew up too sometimes, and there'd be scribbles or drawings, but um, sometimes I would come across too like a passage, and I remember in third grade especially one stood out to me, and it was just like I was I had just learned in school that it was like the month of Mary. May was the month of Mary, and so I was writing there, and I was like, did you know, Mary, that this is your month? And it was just this whole conversation about like, this is all for you, and this is great. So
Wow.
there were just those little highlights that sometimes I would have some lucidity in what I was writing. It wasn't just the like scribbles, and
So your first thing you wrote about was Mary in the month of May.
that's what I remember. I mean,
Wow.
but that was like the longest starting to really journal. Yeah, because it's a discipline, and I think at first it was just like cool that I had this book. But things that really touched me were coming out, and they'd come out in like the longer forms. Yeah.
And then after that, did you start writing more?
I did well here and there, I guess. But then in high school, I took a creative writing class, and then that led me in college. I ended up taking creative nonfiction writing for my major. And
So did you go to St. Raphael's School?
I did. Yep.
And then where'd you go to high school?
Oakland Catholic.
So why did you choose an all-girls school opposed to like, co-ed school?
Well, at first it was a little rough. I
Sure.
wasn't sure, but in the end, it was good being there. And I just having that familiarity, I think, and it wasn't a super large school, so that I think was appealing as well because it was easier for me to assimilate and have friendships and lasting friendships. So yeah, that spoke to me a lot.
Now, speaking of speaking, you were in the French club.
Mhm.
Did you get a little French experience like that? Did you get
A little bit?
Yeah?
I
do
did.
you remember any phrases in French?
Oh, non parler français, mon petit.
What do you think fascinated
Not
you
a
about
lot.
French? Why would you learn French? What was it that
Well, I mean, it was a beautiful Romance language,
Uh-huh.
and I think it just because of its it related to so many other. I mean, from it you could pick up on like Spanish and
Sure.
the love languages, and so it was very easy to relate with it to other learning.
Did you have
Yeah.
any saints that you really liked from France?
Well, St. Joan of Arc
Okay.
is certainly and was the patron of Oakland Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you know about St. Joan of Arc that inspires you?
I think just especially her journeying into a war zone, into she just really, what she felt the Lord was calling her to, she pursued it. No holds bar, and even when she was betrayed by her own countrymen, everything about it, like her story is so fascinating that she was willing to pursue fighting for her country, um, because the Lord was calling her to do that. And yet there was just so many things against her.
So if somebody had never heard of St. Joan of Arc, how would you tell her story? Like, what do you recall about her story that inspired you? She lived about like 500 years ago or so. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then what happened? She became a warrior?
Yeah, I mean, and I think at a young age, she heard the Lord, speaking to her, because and that's the thing, a lot of these saints, they're drawn to this contemplation and this silence and this being apart from the world. And then the Lord speaks to them and gives them a mission. And it's like, you're going to go back into the world. like this is not where we're staying. Right? So,
you never felt that, right?
right.
Yeah.
I know, it's so nice. And it's like, no.
So yeah, Joan of Arc, during that time of France, they're being, I think, basically under siege by the English, and there were factions going on, right? And she wanted to free her country.
Yeah, and so the Lord was telling her, like, I'm calling you to fight, and so I mean, she put on the armor and she got in there. Nobody knew, but then when it came out, I mean, she was a heretic, and the voice was, heretical. This was coming from the devil, superstition. And so, and even as battles were being won and then things were being overturned, but she was still like she was being handed over by her own countrymen. And
right. Well, the cardinal as well.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I don't know if you've read any books about her, but like Mark Twain probably has the definitive biography, and he's not a Catholic whatsoever,
Right.
but he's probably one of the most famous American authors. And he would basically say that his book on Joan of Arc was his most important work. And it was the one that really helped him. Like at the beginning, he goes, if you don't believe in God with this story, then there's really no,
Right.
Yeah.
And
what about her trial and her death? Do you remember anything from that's inspiring?
I mean, I just remember her being, in front of all these, all the cardinals and these men of the church, and it was like a test for them. And I mean, they just really were struggling with, whether or not to stand up for her. And, in the end, I mean, she did end up being burned at the stake. So it was, but her time in jail as well. I mean, it was just, I know she was when she was in there, like faced a lot of, a lot of mistreatment. And and
do you think she was abused in jail?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because she was a woman.
Right.
And
so there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
So defending that and asking too for to be in the better part of the jail, the safer part.
Yeah.
I think she was granted permission for that and to keep her clothes on.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of things she had to really fight for, even in the small ways,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often, when so anyway, there's a great movie with Peter O'Toole's in. He's this famous actor, and he plays the role of the bad cardinal. It's really incredible. They don't obviously show the abuse part of it, but what I reflect as you're speaking, it's sometimes hard for us to imagine that God leads us into suffering in order to allow us to experience our total reliance on him, and at the same time that'd be the number one thing, but at the same time be able to find purpose in that suffering by offering it for the salvation of the souls that they've been entrusted with. And so when I think of Joan of Arc at that time, obviously there was very little understanding of rights for women, and so being stuck in a jail with a bunch of men had to be just horrendous. I can't imagine the abuse that she got there. Yeah. And to think that that was the plan of God for her.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, God uses, as it says, right, the weak and the downtrodden. And I mean, but at that point, I mean, she had nothing. right? I mean,
Yeah.
there was nobody. Could only rely on God, and that's what the Lord is getting us to in life. That's where He wants us to be. And at that point, we have everything. Even when there's nothing left on this earth.
Yeah.
But that's when we're most rich, when we're filled, and when we have the strength to stand before, our own death, our own trial.
Mm.
Yeah.
Definitely. I don't know why we're talking about St. Joan of Arc, but anyway, I'm going to finish this chapter on St. Joan of Arc. We did not prepare this at all, but just the fact that, like, when she was being burnt at the stake, there's this phrase, like, she wanted to see a cross.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I don't know about you or those who are listening, but usually when I'm in pain, what I want is the pain to end or to get an aspirin or a painkiller. Do you know what I mean? But what Joan was saying, St. Joan, what she was saying is, this pain is going to help unite my pain to the pain of Jesus. Yes. And that's the most therapeutic use of pain. Yeah. And that turns pain into suffering. In other words, it gives Jesus the opportunity to be with us. Yeah. So it's in our woundedness and our pain that we can have the most intimacy with Jesus Christ. Yeah. Yeah. Did you see that in the life of St. Joan of Arc like that?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I think just like I said, even from a young age and all the way through, I think she continued to give herself and trust in the Lord. And she had doubts along the way, is this really from God? And she would ask Him, but, she trusted. She trusted through all the dark nights. Yep.
So you were in high school? And because obviously I want to get to your consecrated life here. Yeah. But you had a real tragedy in your dad passing, right?
Yeah. So my dad passed away when I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
And
was that expected? Like, was he sick and so you knew it was going to happen?
Yes and no.
I mean,
he had been sick.
Obviously you can't predict when somebody's going to die, but if he...
But he had a heart condition. Okay. So he lived for quite a long time, but it was unexpected in it happening. And actually the day that he did pass away, I was a Eucharistic minister for Oakland Catholic. I was installed that day as a Eucharistic minister. And he came to the Mass and he received communion and he went back to work. And that evening he fell over at the bus stop of cardiac arrest. Wow. And we found out later on from a sister who we were friends with. She said, you gave him viaticum.
Yes.
And so that's sending forth, that giving him the food in the Eucharist to go on and not knowing that at all, Yeah. So that was, I just really felt a powerful connection with him in that. And that was very healing for me. Yeah.
Where were you when you heard that he had died?
Oh, I answered the phone, but it was, the
so
hospital called.
You were at St. Raphael's?
Well, I was at home.
And somebody called there?
Well, yeah, I was at home at that point. Yeah, but somebody called, the hospital. And we went, as a family. And then he was dead when we got there. But
what were, did like the day before, what were some of your last memories with him?
Well, giving him communion, it was like probably the
That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what were things that you missed about him when you graduated and all that? Are there moments where you're just like...
Yeah, because it was senior year. So that was very tough. I think the whole year was just, up and down, because you're getting better, but then something hits you, and I think it took probably 2 or 3 years, just to move beyond, because then you start high school or college and so there's all those milestones that you're facing, and it's tough.
If you had to talk to a high school senior or high school girl today that lost a parent, what would you want to say to them?
Always know that, in that you're, whatever loss you're feeling, you have gained so much because you have somebody who is looking out for you with the Lord, and so, but I think that continue on, and remember too that as we move forward in life, I mean, we are representing our families and our who we have with us and who we've lost along the way, but we always carry with us a part of that person, so
Yeah, I do. I think it's not the same, but I lost my grandfather about 4 years ago, and I'm named after him.
yeah,
So I literally carry his name with me.
yeah,
And so like for me, I was getting on an airplane flying down to Florida for First Communion for my nephews and nieces, and he was going to be present at this First Communion, right? That's what we're going to do. And then so I was getting on this airplane, and that's when I heard that he had passed.
yeah,
And it was in May. And there's this tradition in Mexico, but I wasn't sure if my grandmother, you just never know what's like, because she's still left. But anyways, tradition in Mexico that when somebody dies, they do this called Mass with the body present. So it's like before the official funeral or anything like that. It's literally the body's there and you just do Mass. So I was getting on the airplane with my cousin, who's a priest, Father Chris, and we were both like, oh, because I wasn't going to tell my grandmother what to do. Because sometimes you call right away, you get the funeral home, boom, the body's getting, whatever prepared. And she just left him there.
Oh my God.
Because he was in his bedroom. And so my cousin and I got to celebrate Mass in his room with his body present with a handful of family members.
Yeah.
And both my cousin and I, luckily there was 2 priests there because we cried. So we'd have to go back and forth. Like,
yeah.
He wanted to preach, but then he couldn't preach, so I preached. Then I think I got through the consecration, and then I cried, and then he took the Eucharistic prayer. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Did you feel that way? Like, it's just like when you lose somebody so close to you.
Yeah. No, and I do, and I think there is the tension and pressure sometimes. Like you feel like, you feel what you're carrying. You feel that grief, but you also feel like you know the gift that they've given to you, and you want to carry that forth and represent that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I agree.
Yeah.
Like, you can see moments in your life where you're carrying forth that great love your dad had for you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably not many days that go by where you don't think about that, right?
Yeah.
So after high school, you went to Carlow.
I went to Carlow College, yep, and I studied creative nonfiction writing. And I graduated in 2013. And throughout that time, I worked at West Penn Hospital. I was involved too in the Newman Center, the oratory we have here. So I did a lot of activities with them. I went to Rome for a spring break trip, I think my sophomore year. So that was exciting. And that was really, continuing to grow in my faith, at that point I was starting to really look into a vocation to religious life. So that was.
Did you ever boyfriends or anything like that in high school or college?
No, not really. Yeah. I didn't date until actually after I left the convent. And
wow.
Yeah, there was somebody that we were friends in our parish and we dated briefly, but from about 3rd grade, I had an interest in religious life. So it was something I saw a joy in a sister I had as a teacher there. And
what was her name?
Sister Judith Canan.
Oh, yeah, I know Sister Judith.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I love
So she was your 3rd grade teacher?
She's my 3rd grade
Isn't that
teacher.
interesting? That's when you opened up to be able to write, too.
Yeah, no, and because
it's kind of all flourishing there.
Yes,
oh, wow.
Yes, because I remember she would teach us about Mary and everything. It started there with her, and she took us on a tour of the convent. So it was planted at that point. And by 8th grade, it's confirmation, and I was like, I really want to do this, but it was just something it was hard. It's hard in our church sometimes, to find the support. And when you're young, like to reach. So, reaching out, like I was finding my way in the church, but I was nervous. So divulging this to anybody, I was like, I don't know,
Well, hard. It's like Joan of Arc hard. Like, you have to be a courageous young woman to be like, I'm going to be a nun. And here you are in 8th grade in high school with a bunch of girls that are probably not thinking of the same thing you are. And the environment of our high school girls and guys today, let's just say they're not praying a lot of rosaries as they're drinking and doing all kinds of stuff on weekends. Central Catholic, but I don't know if they're all like, maintaining their love for Jesus
so.
on weekends every day. You know,
But-
I know I didn't, so I'm
Yeah,
with them. So
yeah. So you're kind of like,
yeah, that's
you're trying to
courageous.
fit in, but you're
Yeah.
also like, so it's almost like living these two worlds. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I have friends, but at the same time, it's like, you know, I'm going to church and stuff. And after my dad passed away is when it really like, I mean, I remember the day after he died, I went to daily mass. And that's something I don't think I'd really ever done. And once when I was younger, I had to go to mass for a week, I think as a punishment. And it was a great, and I never told my parents, it was the greatest thing ever. So, I mean, there's little ways that God slips in, you know. But
what'd you do wrong to deserve that?
see, I don't even know.
Oh, you don't know.
It was just a really creative in forming punishment. It was great. You know, I mean, it had its moments because when you're in your teens and going to mass every day, people are like, "Why is she here?" You know. But yeah. So I just, as I grew up, I mean, those little things built, and then, you know, after college is when I really started to look, and I looked at the Felician sisters, and that's where I felt.
And that's Olsh, where Olsh is?
Yes.
And what sisters did you talk to there? Do you know Sister Blizzard and those sisters up there? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I had visited with them in high school, college,
Sure.
here and there, and then, you know, I just, there was a point where I was like, I need to just live and experience some things. So I took a little break, but after college, I was working in a daycare for a little bit, and and I was going to mass, and I was, you know, adoration, but it hit. There was one night in adoration where I couldn't let go, and I was like, oh, I need to call the vocation director, and like, you know, and you're like, I haven't even talked to them in so long. I don't know. So I put it off, but it came back. So I ended up calling, and it just went from there. And 2000, maybe it was the fall of 13 or 14, I entered, I think it was 2014.
And you graduated from Carlo at this point?
Yes. So I graduated, worked for a year.
Right.
And then I entered the sisters in 2014. And then I went through 2 years of postulancy and 7 months of novitiate. And that was all in Connecticut. So we'd come back and visit here and there. But I lived at the convent next to Olsh for a little bit too. And it just, you know, as I was growing in that process, I was realizing how much like religious life is beautiful as a community. And I kept wanting to be in the parish. And I was like, there's this going on and that going on. And so it just was not jiving because I was being called, which at the time I didn't know what I was being called to, because I knew I felt this exclusivity for the Lord. Like I meant to be with the Lord, and like in our church, that's, you know, there's not this knowledge of consecrated virginity very much. So I'm thinking, well, if I'm called to be with the Lord, I am meant to be in the convent. And there was honestly no other order I could think of. Like, I loved the Felicians, and I still keep in touch with many. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? You know? And so it took a while. It took a while for me to finally realize, like, I am not called to be in this life. And it was hard. But when I finally realized it, there was such a peace. I had no clue what I was doing. I mean, I left. I came back here to Pittsburgh. I lived at my mom's house for a little bit. I had like no car, no job, no house, no
So
nothing.
you joined the Felicians for 2.5, 3 years, and you came back around 2017 or something like that?
Yes, it was Holy Week of
Holy Week.
2017.
Okay, Holy Week
yeah.
2017. And you had no possessions, you had no money,
Nothing.
you had no job.
And honestly, that is, I will say, even now, I have never in my life felt more freedom than I felt at that time. It's freeing. It really is to have like nothing. But the Lord, you know, and slowly I came back. I mean, and
that takes so much courage, because to have to admit to your mom and dad that I'm coming back. You walk. I mean, you didn't obviously, but like, you know, you're walking back with your head down, but you didn't feel that. You're like, I honestly tried to give my life to Jesus, And now there's this second calling. It's almost like what happened with Mary, where she just wanted to be a virgin who was married, and all of a sudden she's having a baby.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's this calling within a calling.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I mean, my mom was so, I mean, she was glad to have me back. So it was wonderful to, come back to that. And
But the second calling took a little while. So like
yeah.
you left the Felicians and then you dated.
So I dated briefly. Yep.
Mhm.
Because that was something, I needed to see.
Yeah.
And, but at the whole time I don't know, like, it was just a lot of like adjustment. So I think there was a lot of that, like figuring out. But and so, I did date, and then I just really was feeling called though to continue this life of service and prayer. I kept going to daily mass as often as I could. I kept doing Liturgy of the Hours. I definitely took that book with me from the convent, but I'd taken it from another convent. So I was like, I need this. So I just kept, a lot of those practices were there. And so I for a little bit, I looked at cloistered life because that was an avenue I'd never explored. And as quickly, even before I went to visit it was the Poor Clare Collatines.
Where?
Near Cleveland. They're just.
So some of the cloistered nuns would be what, the Poor Clares? Would the Carmelites be considered
Carmelites or cloistered? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones.
So like Saint Therese, going back to your French saints,
yes.
like so that was that. And then here in central Pennsylvania, there's Carmelites in central Pennsylvania. Bishop Walter Scheid is one of their chaplains there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you saw the Poor Clares and.
Yeah, so I visited them, and actually the mother abbess, that's, but whatever mother, she and I met, and I just remember her saying to me, like, before we barely got started chatting, and she's like, you could be a consecrated virgin, or you could, be single, or you could do that. And I was like, but I'm here to explore this. She knew that I was apprehensive, and it wasn't the fit.
Was she the one that first told you about consecrated virgins? Because you can't really
No, yeah.
Like, how did you hear about them?
No, actually, she wasn't the first, but one of the first.
Yeah. Who told you about it?
So when I came back from the convent, I was reading the Pittsburgh Catholic, and Sheila Ryan, she's the first consecrated virgin in this diocese. Her story was in the Catholic. So I came across it, and I saw it, and I thought that, and I knew then, I said, this is what I want, but it was too soon. And I had a priest friend say, it's too soon. You need to just live your life. You need to do things, So I did, but it's sort of stuck in the background, but I couldn't find a lot of, resources. I didn't know Sheila well, and I kind of poked around. She's at St. Richard's Parish. So I would go to daily mass because it was near my mom. And sitting in the pew sheepishly, like, maybe that's her. Maybe I'll see her. Like, how will I figure this out?
You were stalking a consecrated. Are we allowed to say that?
Yes.
That's creepy. No.
Yeah. So, but then so it kind of was there, but then kind of went away because I didn't know what to do with it. I'm like, well, if there's no resources, let me explore this cloister life. And I did that. Not for me. I came back. But just before I actually went to visit the cloistered, there is a woman who's a consecrated virgin, just moved to my parish. And her name's Jeannie McNulty. And I was talking with her. And so even as I was going to visit the cloistered order, the Poor Clares, like, I had this little nudge of consecrated virginity. And so when I came back, I met with Jeannie, and Jeannie and I share a lot. She was in religious orders as well and left, and finally found her path to consecrated virginity. And so when I chatted with her, and at that point, it was like, this is what I want. And it was really just this path, all these steps, going into the Felicians and leaving the Felicians and exploring the Poor Clares, and then looking into consecrated virginity. Like, I was really looking, the word that I used to really pull it all together is settledness.
Mm.
You know, and I remember, you know, talking with God in prayer and saying, like, I really want to be settled. And that could mean being a missionary, going from here to there. It doesn't mean being in one place forever. It just means within myself, I wanted to know, what are you calling me to? And where do I belong? And how am I to live out this expression of your love? So it was looking for that through all these steps. And then when I found Consecrated Virginity, it gave me the missing links, because I realized, like, I didn't want to leave. Once I came back and I was in Pittsburgh, I love this diocese. I was working for the church, and I'll share that in a minute, but I was working for the church in a way. I was praying the daily office. I was going to mass. So I'm like, I'm living this life. But I wanted accountability, and I wanted, like, just a little, you know, stronger identity, something more. And so, in finding that, this vocation puts me under the bishop and ties me into my local parish and the diocese. And it gives me that little bit of more, because I also then pray for the diocesan seminarians, priests, deacons, and bishops, of course. And so it gave me that, what I was looking for.
So you'll pray for Father Jay?
Yes,
Okay,
definitely.
thank you. And Father Mike and Father Jack and Father Joe while we're at it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So what is consecrated life?
So, so consecrated. There's
Consecrated Virginity. Talk about the genres
because
here.
there's a
Because
lot,
we're splitting
yeah.
gnats' eyelashes. I don't know if you've ever split an eyelash of a gnat,
Yeah.
but that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So, like, most people, they're lucky to know what a religious is, like
It's true.
the nuns.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about consecrated, and then within the consecrated, my sister's consecrated.
Yes.
Right? That's a genre of consecration.
Right.
And you have another genre called Consecrated Virginity.
Yes.
So let's talk about your branch of it and just kind of
Yeah.
work our way back. So in its detail, what does it mean to be a consecrated virgin?
Well, so it means that I am espoused to the Lord. I'm married to Jesus, and I'm living this life in a way that leads others towards heaven, because that's where the ultimate marriage with Christ is, right? So we're working our way as church to heaven. And so I live out my life in service to the church, particularly through my parish. And so I serve, wherever my parish is. And right now, Our Lady of the Angels. And so different ways. I mean, Jeannie, who's also there, she and I pray evening prayer every Thursday evening. And just helping out in any way. I help out with RCIA. And then, so helping out in service at my parish, also through the diocese. I've worked at Mary's Place in the past, which it's a home for moms and babies that is just wonderful in its mission. I work for the Capuchin Friars. I do development work there. So all these ways of serving. Yeah.
Now I see on your finger you have
Yes.
a ring. Can you describe that?
So the wedding ring is the only visible sign of a consecrated virgin.
Mm-hmm.
And my actual consecration, my rite of consecration this past August, I received the ring blessed by Bishop Zubik. And so that is what symbolizes my marriage to the Lord.
I think we have some pictures. If we get to get some pictures of the consecration. So what part of this, so if you can't see this at home, the bishop, this is in St. Paul's Cathedral, right?
Yes.
Our cathedral here in Pittsburgh. The bishop has his hands, it looks like he's lifting up your veil and maybe putting his hands on your head, or tell us what's going on at this moment. And you look like a bride.
Yes.
Okay.
So you dress as a bride. You're very representative of the bride. And he actually puts the veil on my head.
Okay.
So it's interesting because I don't walk down the aisle at the beginning of Mass veiled.
Correct.
I get veiled partway through. And that is to show that connection, with the bishop acting in the person of Christ.
Okay.
And he is, the bridegroom, and I am the bride.
Okay.
Yep. And
talk about the actual ceremony. How does it go? Like, so you start off in the front pew. Is Mass just a normal Mass? So what's going on there?
Yeah, so it's a normal mass, I guess, but it kind of heightened. Well, they also recommend having this ceremony on a special day, and so for me, this was the feast of the Assumption,
Beautiful.
August 15th.
August 15th, sure.
Yeah, and so I come down the aisle, and I had two sponsors, as we call them, kind of like bridesmaids.
Okay.
So
Are they that?
Yep.
And who are they?
Lizzie is on the left,
Okay.
and Madeline is on the right. They're
Wow.
both actually in the process of becoming consecrated virgins themselves.
That's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. And so they kind of flanked me the whole time. And as I came down the aisle as well, I was carrying a lamp.
Mhm.
And that harkens back to Matthew 25 with the 10 wise virgins who kept the oil and kept their lamps burning brightly for when the bridegroom would come in the watch of the night. We don't know. So that is poignant in representing the vocation. And actually, again, that's not lit. A lot of things are like signs of what's to come. And so it's just before I'm called up into the sanctuary to be with the bishop that the lamp is lit.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it sits on a table for the rest of Mass lit, which is nerve-wracking, hoping it stays. Some women would use candles too. It depends.
You mean like it's probably a bad thing to say, but it would like bad luck if it blows out.
I was like, please don't go out.
Did you literally think that? Like,
Yes.
You're like, no, this could be bad. I can't have my candle. Because unfortunately, in that parable,
Right.
the ones that don't have the candle is because they were like the unwise virgins.
Like, please.
And did it go out?
No.
Okay,
no.
good job. So
But
it was a valid consecration.
Yeah.
All right, so the bishop calls you into the sanctuary, and what's the ritual? How does it go?
So it's really beautiful. It's a dialogue between the bishop and me.
Right.
And so he calls me forth, and it's, and then I reply to him. So this back and forth going, and then he asks me, just like it's similar to ordination.
Yeah, I think one of the questions is, are you resolved to persevere to the end of your days in the holy state of virginity and in the service of God and his church?
Yeah.
And you say,
I am.
I am. And then
Yeah.
I think the bishop says, are you resolved to follow Christ in the spirit of the gospel, that your whole life may be faithful witness to God's love and convincing sign of the kingdom of heaven?
I am, yeah.
Are you resolved to accept the solemn consecration as a bride of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's thanks be to God. The
Right.
whole church giving their consent. And yeah.
Now, do you pray the prayer of consecration or to the bishop?
Bishop, yep. So, those are the three questions he asks, the three, we call it propositum, but my resolution to do this. And then we have the litany of the saints,
Sure.
which the whole church prays. And then it
Was St. Joan of Arc mentioned in your litany? Sorry, don't worry about it.
And yeah, I know.
Just
I
distracted me.
don't know.
I was thinking about the Litany of Saints and how St. Joan of Arc was so present there, regardless of if she was mentioned,
Yeah.
because the cathedral's tied into Oakland Catholic.
Which is
where
true,
you work.
because
And in the back, there's that beautiful statue of
and
St.
that's
Joan of
where
Arc.
I dressed and I prayed to her before.
Yeah, okay, so she was there.
She was definitely there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And so, and at one point though, I'm kneeling before the bishop, and I make my resolution, like it's stating it like for sure, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I just remember I had cards for the whole thing, just, in case you forget, but I put that card down because this was like, and I looked right at him because that was the moment. It was like, I know this and this is what I want to do. And it was just so intimate for me. And in being consecrated, I take on this relationship with the bishop where he acts, it's like a father-daughter relationship. And so that was a moment for me. It was really defining. Yeah. And then
So you have your veil on. Would this been after the consecration?
Right after the consecration.
Now, when do you get the ring?
So he put that on my finger as well.
Okay.
So it's 3 steps. I think he gives me the ring, he puts the veil on, and then he gives me the prayer book. Yep. And so that binds me in service, praying for the whole church. So I'm bound to pray morning prayer and evening prayer every day.
So, I mean, religious communities take a vow of chastity, which is virginity.
Yeah.
Consecrated take similar promises, which is virginity as well.
Yeah.
Why do you add virginity to consecration?
So this is very interesting, and I love it. Yeah, because it's the defining point, but it's something that's so overlooked. So virginity, for a woman called to consecrated virginity, it's a gift, and so it's something that we receive this gift of virginity from time eternal, and it's really just that the Lord is blessing it, and it's giving us the grace to preserve this unto death and into eternity. And not all women are called to that, and some women, are. I mean, if you're called to religious life, there isn't the requirement necessarily of virginity. Some women have been married and have kids, so it just depends on how the Lord calls. But for a consecrated virgin, especially in the rite of consecration itself, I did not take any vows. And that's something that really distinguishes really a nun or a sister from a consecrated virgin, because on the part of a sister, they give themselves to Christ, and so they're acting. And on my part, I received a blessing through the bishop, and so my part was like just to receive and be receptive, and then by the grace that I received from that blessing, I live out the gift of my virginity in the world.
So the receptivity becomes the key.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And do you have a vow of poverty?
No.
So you can make as much money as you like?
Yes, but no. Right? Just like you. I mean, living simply, because I don't think that.
Yeah, I'm not a simple liver though. So you obviously live your life in gospel harmony with St. Francis. I live at his house, but he would look at my TVs and be like, yeah, the Volvo I have, and be like, so I can't. I did take a vow of poverty, and for 18 years I lived with nothing.
Yeah.
Supposedly in the legionaries, but then when I came to diocesan, they didn't. But you do take some type of a promise of obedience to the bishop, right? Or
so no, but again, it's that filial relationship, and so it's really just living in a way that he supports me and my vocation, and I, promise my prayers to him every day, and I meet with him once or twice a year. So yeah, it's really just a relationship of support,
So a difference between a nun and you would be that nuns would actually take their consecration to a superior, which would represent that, whereas here it's the local bishop.
Yes.
They take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They could also take some special vows as well, humility, charity. There's other types of vows. And typically it's started by a religious community, like like Saint, well, there's saints, so to speak, that would represent some of the charisms that they would stand for, right? But with consecrated virginity, how would you describe the charism or the holiness that you would aspire to, as looking back at the history of the church a little bit?
Well, the charism
the charism.
Is it's spousal.
Okay.
So it's really to be that spouse of Christ in the world first and foremost, and comes from prayer, and then from that prayer comes the works of charity that we put forth. So
from the spousal union is where the fruitfulness of your life comes from, right?
Yeah.
And is there a style of prayer that you, as a consecrated virgin, tend to pray more than others, like you mentioned already? Obviously, you probably go to mass every once in a while, at least on Sundays, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm joking. And then you pray the Liturgy of the Hours, which is something that priests and clergy pray as well. Yeah. But there's something specific to a consecrated virgin's prayer life that would be maybe something that you'd want to share?
Well, honestly, each is unique to each woman, but there's definitely, I think, an overarching Marian aspect. I mean, Mary is the Virgin of Virgins, right? So, and I think St. Joseph as well, having devotion to St. Joseph, I would imagine would fall into a lot of consecrated virgin lives, because he's the protector of virgins, and so definitely those two pillars.
But you don't have a community,
right? So praying is
that hard?
Well, it can be at times, but not. Honestly, I think that it's something that I find the community in the diocese and in my parish.
Okay.
And I've never, I don't know, I sometimes it's like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people to listen to their stories and to celebrate marriage, births, baptisms. I mean, there's never a shortage of community life, honestly. I mean, babysitting, I have friends that babysat.
So you're open to babysitting?
No. I've got a lot going on, but
before we finish, what are ways to connect? I think you have a blog that you run.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's called virginandmother.wordpress.com.
Yes.
Virgin and Mother are one word, .wordpress.com. And so talk about this.
Well, I started it a few years ago, probably about a year and a half or so, just before my consecration. And I poked around on it, but the opening page especially really gives you a good sense of the vocation, and lays out, gives you some websites. Consecratedvirgins.org is the website for the USACV, which is an organization of consecrated virgins in the United States. And so I just wrote some articles that express my relationship with the Lord.
And then if somebody wanted to connect with you, maybe somebody knows somebody who's discerning or would maybe want to know about consecrated virginity, would you be open to talking to them?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so is that the best Gmail?
Yep.
So it's lmgault22@gmail.com. 22. What's the 22 for?
Just what I threw in at the time.
Just a good number. That's okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Stuck around with me.
Just stuck around with you.
Yeah.
So before we finish, what do you think the purpose of consecrated virginity is today? Because it was obvious when it first started that there was this need for people to receive Jesus for women, right? But what about today?
Oh, gosh. Well, today I think that we need it to really represent a true sense of the dignity of the feminine vocation and the femininity in our world.
Right.
Bless you. And to bring forth Christ in a way that is uniquely feminine.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think there's such an awareness today of the role of women in society that's been different than in the past.
Yeah.
And I know, like John Paul II would talk about the feminine genius.
Yeah.
And obviously part of that is one of the great characteristics of women is their receptivity.
Yes.
And so by you receiving Jesus's love as a spouse, the fruitfulness of your life comes from the fact that your identity is based on that little ring that you got on your finger there, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really something that the world can really feel as a witness.
Yeah. Yeah. When women talk about wanting to serve in the church, I'm like, this is an option. Yeah.
Now, my sister's consecrated, a little different than you, but basically the same style of like living in. She's working at Oakland Catholic. Yeah. You mentioned some other consecrateds there in the Pittsburgh area as well.
Yeah. So I mean, there. Well, Jeannie at my parish, and then Sheila is at St. Richard's, I believe, and there's going to be the other two young women. Yeah. Who hopefully, down the line we're. So
now, as a pastor, you never came to me to see if you wanted to like work in my parish at all. Do you know? Are there consecrated virgins that are looking for places to come? Because I think our community would love to have one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know currently, but I mean, it's worth.
Will you put the word out there for us?
I definitely will.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool. Just a note, we're going to be exploring Catholicism on the road. This is going to be so exciting.
Yeah.
We're going to go to our 4 churches in our great grouping and spend a Thursday at each of the churches. So the first one is St. John the Baptist, which is our oldest parish, and roots back to right near the Civil War. This parish. It's just so exciting to go and be able to speak about the history there. So that'll be April 7th at St. John the Baptist, and then each Thursday after we're going to go to a different parish. So it's a really fun way to do a road trip. We did a road trip before to all the shrines, the 4 shrines of Pittsburgh, and it was so much fun. We would go in, get a tour, and just be able to I love St. Patrick's,
Yes.
the holy stairs, and to be able to do that is really is a real grace. So, well, Lauren, thank you for coming on the program today. I just wanted to finish with this little prayer and just praise God for her gift that she is for me and for our church. To think that a woman would set aside her whole life so that she could receive Jesus's love, and then from that be able to spread that. So I can't think of a better way for people to see the power of Jesus's love than through your life and through the witness that you offer our church.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let's end in prayer. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. This is a prayer from Father Pedro Arupe, which is on your website there. Fall in Love, it's called. Nothing is more practical than finding God than falling in love in a quite absolute final way. What you are in love with, what seizes your imagination, will affect everything. It will decide what will get you out of bed in the morning, what you do with your evenings, how you spend your weekends, what you read, whom you know, what breaks your heart, and what amazes you with joy and gratitude. Fall in love, stay in love, and it will decide everything. And may God bless all of you, Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God loves you.